cryokinesis and pyrokinesis. This is cryo as in cryogenics, cryo, cold. Cryokinesis, just either of these kineses produce a little area of damage. Anything caught up in that area is going to get hit by whatever element it is, hot or cold, and receive some damage. And if it's fire, they'll get caught on fire, just like how Flaming Hands works. And if it's freezing, they're just going to get frozen, just like how Freezing Hands work. This is just another version of that, essentially, and it doesn't mess with your glove wearingness. Kinesis, just like hands attacks, flaming and freezing, lets you hit multiple enemies at once, which is one very good thing about them. But besides that, I tend to not go for them. They cost a lot of points, and I just can't find a way to squeeze points out to get any of these with all the other things that I really want more. Domination, you guys have seen that. That's an amazing ability. No need to discuss it any further. If there's anything else that I can do with it that I haven't shown before, I'll be showing that later on. Disintegration. This is another digging ability, sort of. It is probably the most powerful ability in the game, and because of that, it makes you not able to do anything for a couple of turns, or 3 turns. Yep, 3 turns. There it is. Which isn't such a terrible loss, considering that everything around you is probably going to be dead anyways once you're done using disintegration. Essentially, all that does is make everything around you get damaged a ton. This is a very dangerous ability when combined with a certain other ability. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And like corrosive gas generation, this can destroy things behind doors and make you lose out on them. Let's see what else is here. These force things are interesting, but I'll not go over them. Light manipulation, you've seen that already. That's my Laze ability. I get to have some light gather around my character to allow him to see better and use up that light to attack enemies. It slowly comes back, but using it up does mean, at least for a short time, that if I'm in a dark area, I can't see as well, or, yeah. Some of these other abilities, precognition, you've seen. Psychometry is pretty interesting, but I won't go into that. Pyrokinesis. Space-time vortex technically can be used as a digging ability, but it is very dangerous and perhaps one of the worst digging abilities because of this. Not only can it suck you up if you're not careful and send you to a random place, possibly a place with enemies that'll just kill you instantly, but it can also summon enemies that are way too strong for you and kill you instantly. And like the other attack-ish digging abilities, it can destroy loot. Very hard to control, and although it's very cool, I would suggest not going anywhere near it. Teleportation, I'm sure you guys can understand, figure out what that does. It lets you teleport around. That's a good ability. And see, I skipped clairvoyance. You can combine clairvoyance and teleportation to make an artificial digging ability. Technically, this works with a certain other analytical genius ability, but you'd never want to do that because analytical genius is a terrible ability. Clairvoyance lets you see some area that you haven't seen yet, and teleportation lets you go somewhere you've seen. So if there's a place you can't go to, you can't see it normally. But if you use clairvoyance, you can see it, and then you can teleport to it. Kind of like phasing, except it uses 2 abilities instead of 1. Teleportation alone is already useful, so I guess if you already are going to use teleportation for your setup, clairvoyance might be something worth getting, but I wouldn't go out of my way to get both of them when I can just get something else. So that's what I suggest to you guys. Some other interesting abilities. Here is Temporal Fuge. I used to think this was a much better ability. I'm starting to think that it's not, though. It lets you create multiple copies of yourself to help you in combat. Multiple copies of you can use various mutant abilities, which is both a blessing and a curse. It's good because you get to have them shoot out bunches of electrical discharge or whatever other ability you're using. Flaming hands, it can essentially double or triple or quadruple your fighting ability in that way. But then temporal fuses can also hurt you or piss off neutral or friendly units. They aren't controlled by you, they're controlled by the computer, and sadly the computer is not so intelligent. I do notice that they often try to avoid hitting me, at least, when I'm using temporal fuse. But when it comes to a certain other ability, disintegration, they don't really try at all to avoid hitting me, which is kind of terrible, considering that disintegration from a temporal fusite can hit you for over 30 damage. And if you have multiple temporal fusites, they're all going to hit you, likely, for over 30 damage before you know what's happening, and you're going to die. Not a good combination. I would stay away from that. If you get one, never get the other. Here are the defects. Defects are very interesting. Notice how they cost a negative pointage. These various defects hurt your character, but in return they give you the ability to buy more of these mutations up here that are useful. So if you can find some kind of balance between defects and abilities, you may end up with a stronger character, hopefully. You guys may have noticed before I went a little bit into albino. I find that to be the best defect for my setup. It seems to only affect trade, making traders give you less money for the same goods, but I usually end up with more than enough trade goods for anything I need, so I don't find that particularly hurtful, especially considering that when I finally do end up meeting traveling traders who have very expensive things, I should already be able to dominate them and just steal their stuff. For having good stuff, they aren't so difficult to dominate. Kind of strange. They're also safe to dominate. From what I've seen, they don't attack you if they resist. Some of these other abilities might be interesting. Might want to look into those. Blinking Tick can technically be a digging ability if you're very lucky. But besides that, I'd say stay away from all of these. Not all of them. I shouldn't say that. Some of them are not so terrible. Just be careful what you pick and make sure that it matches what you want to do. Some of these, like Amphibious, are obviously terrible. Brittle Bones, I guess if you're going to stay away from all enemy attacks, you might want to do that, but yeah. The more expensive, the more points they give you, generally the worse of an effect they have on you. So that's enough of that. I'll just, whoops, don't want to put into that. I'll just quickly get some of these abilities that I always do. Let's get this. And I'm going to finish it off with an electric generation. Oh, one thing I did not mention about albino. Some of these, some abilities make you unable to get other abilities. So, for instance, if you have flaming hands, you can't get freezing hands or burrowing claws. When you get one hand ability, you can't get any more hand abilities. There are also armor abilities. Quills and Carapace, I think, are the two armor abilities. And if you have albino, it doesn't really make sense to get photosynthetic skin. You can't be ridiculously white and green at the same time. So says the game. So I don't really like photosynthetic skin. I'll tell you why I choose not to go for it. It is useful because it makes you not starve to death very easily on the map. It lets you get essentially food from just being under the sun. You don't get food when you're in a cave, which doesn't really matter because there should be enough from the corpses that you get from killing everything. But what was I talking about? When you're actually on the map, you should it should be a little bit easier to travel around because you don't have to carry around large amounts of food. I still don't go for this though because it's not that hard to get incredibly large amounts of food that weigh nothing if you have harvestry. Let's see. So we want to get this. There you are. And notice how we end up with 0 skill points. Here are bunches of classes. Pick your calling, essentially. There's just various jobs that you kind of start out with. Water Vine Farmer seems to be one of the easiest ones to start out with. This is where you get that 2 toughness to make toughness go from being a lower ability than these 18 guys to being higher, which is kind of why I, in advance, took that out of toughness, even though willpower couldn't really make better use of it. It really can, because of the one thing I plan to do with it, and literally that's it. Water Vine Farmers start out with being good at using axes, good for starting combat. They also start out being able to harvest things and harvest them well. Normally when you first learn how to harvest, you can only get half the stuff from each harvest. 1 witchwood bark per witchwood tree, 10 water vine wafers per water vine. I like being able to start out just getting tons of witchwood bark easily, so I go for this. Technically, if you have domination, you don't need harvestry, because you can just dominate some of the farmers that live in Joppa and make them harvest for you. They will be able to harvest even if you don't know how to. Kind of odd, but who needs to have logic in a video game? So let's start out with this. This is the screen that you guys may be familiar with, and we are going to call ourselves Ray Magini. So this will be the end of this little video, and next video we'll actually be starting out with this Ray Magini guy. I'll be showing off a few things that I did not show off before that are good to consider when starting off in the game. I'll also be showing off some interesting, at least one interesting item I plan to show off that is guaranteed to appear in that first dungeon at the very bottom level. It is a little dangerous to go after, at least early on, which is why I chose not to, but you'll learn more about that later. Bye bye.